The stars looked peaceful from the observation deck of Earth's defense station. Commander Jake Morrison stood with his hands behind his back, watching the darkness of space.
He had been stationed here for 3 years and nothing exciting ever happened.
Earth was a small player in the galaxy, and most days passed quietly. That peace ended when 300 alien warships appeared at the edge of the solar system. Jake's communication officer shouted across the bridge. The sensors were going crazy. Ships were appearing everywhere, massive vessels that made Earth's biggest warships look like toys. Jake felt his stomach drop. This was not a friendly visit. This was an invasion force. The transmission came through minutes later. A four-eyed alien appeared on the main screen. His name was Ambassador Vectar, and he represented the Galactic Council. The Council had ruled the known universe for 12,000 years. They were the most powerful force in the galaxy, and everyone followed their rules. Jake had met Council representatives before. They always looked at humans like parents looking at small children. But this time, Vectar's message was different. He did not ask for anything. He simply told Earth what would happen. The Council had voted, and Earth had been chosen for something called resource extraction. Humanity had 30 days to leave their planet. They would be moved to lifeless moons and other star systems. Earth would be stripped for minerals. The oceans would be drained. The atmosphere would be processed. The decision was final. Jake could not believe what he was hearing. They wanted to destroy Earth. They wanted to take the only home humanity had ever known and turn it into a mining operation. 30 days. That was all the time they had to evacuate 8 billion people. On Earth, President Claire Bennett received the same message in her emergency bunker beneath Geneva. She sat surrounded by her top advisors, watching the alien ambassador deliver his ultimatum. The room was silent except for Vectar's voice. When the transmission ended, everyone started talking at once. General Ryan Cooper, head of Earth's military forces, stood up and slammed his fist on the table. He wanted to fight. He said they could not just give up their planet without a battle. But another advisor pulled up the numbers on a screen. Earth had 80 warships. The Council had 300 just sitting at the edge of their system. Earth's weapons were primitive compared to Council technology. A fight would end in minutes and humanity would lose. President Bennett rubbed her temples. She felt tired and old. 40 years ago, humans had made their first contact with alien life. They had been so excited to join the galactic community. They had followed every rule, signed every treaty, tried to be good members of the Council. And now the Council was taking their home away like it meant nothing. A quiet voice spoke from the end of the table. Dr. Ben Carter was the head of Earth's Advanced Weapons Research Division. He was a thin man with gray hair and glasses that were always sliding down his nose. He raised his hand like a student in class. When everyone looked at him, he said 3 words that changed everything. "We have something." The room went silent. President Bennett leaned forward. She asked what he meant. Dr. Carter took a deep breath and told them about Project Warhammer. It was a secret weapon that had been built over 30 years. Only a few hundred people knew about it. The project was hidden in construction yards near Neptune's moon Triton. It had never been tested. It might not work, but if it did work, it could change the entire war. General Cooper asked what kind of weapon. Dr. Carter explained that when humans first met the Council, some scientists realized how outmatched Earth was. A woman named Dr. Lisa Chen and an engineer named Alex Murphy had proposed something crazy. Instead of building many ships to match the Council's fleet, they would build one ship that could destroy everything. A planet killer. A weapon so powerful that enemies would be terrified to attack Earth. President Bennett listened carefully. She asked if the weapon violated any treaties. Dr. Carter nodded. It violated almost every treaty Earth had signed. If the Council had found out about it, they would have demanded it be destroyed. But now the Council was trying to destroy Earth, so treaties did not matter anymore. The President asked the most important question. Could the weapon be finished in 30 days? Dr. Carter smiled for the first time. The weapon was already 98% complete. It was a ship called Judgment, and it just needed final systems installed and a crew. They could have it ready in less than 30 days. They had been preparing for this moment, hoping it would never come, but ready anyway. The debate lasted 2 hours. Some advisors thought it was too risky. The weapon might fail, and then Earth would have nothing. Others worried about what would happen after. If they used a planet-killer weapon, would that make humanity the villains? Would other civilizations fear them forever? General Cooper cut through the arguments. He said the Council was coming to take their planet. They were going to destroy the only home 8 billion humans had ever known. If humanity did not fight back now, with everything they had, then they deserved to lose. The choice was simple: fight or surrender. Live free or become refugees forever. President Bennett looked around the table. She saw fear in every face, but she also saw determination. These people were ready to do whatever it took to save Earth. She made her decision in that moment. Earth would not evacuate. Earth would not surrender their planet to be mined and destroyed. Earth would fight, and they would show the Galactic Council what happened when you pushed humanity too far. She gave the orders. Dr. Carter would go to Triton immediately and finish the weapon. General Cooper would prepare Earth's defense fleet for battle. They would keep the Council thinking humans were preparing to evacuate. Let the aliens believe humanity was beaten. Let them think humans would go quietly. And then when the Council least expected it, humanity would show them what they had built in secret. The meeting ended. People rushed to their tasks. President Bennett sat alone for a moment, looking at a picture of Earth on her screen. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, home. She would not let them take it. She would not let her planet die without a fight. In orbit above Earth, Commander Jake Morrison received new orders. Keep the defense station running normally. Do not let the Council know anything was wrong. Act like Earth was preparing to leave. He looked at the 300 enemy warships waiting at the edge of the system. They seemed so confident, so certain humanity would obey. Jake smiled. The Council had made a big mistake. They had threatened the wrong species. Humans were good at many things, but they were especially good at building weapons when someone tried to hurt them. The Council was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The construction yards near Triton were built in absolute secrecy. They floated in the darkness beyond Neptune, hidden from sensors and satellites. For 30 years, ships had been bringing materials here in small amounts. The Council watched Earth's activities, but they never noticed the slow stream of resources flowing to the outer solar system. Humans were good at hiding things when they needed to. Chief Engineer Alex Murphy had spent 20 years of his life building the ship called Judgment. He was 53 years old now, and his hair had gone completely gray working on this project. He floated through the massive construction bay in zero gravity, his magnetic boots clicking when he walked on metal surfaces. The ship stretched in front of him for 5 kilometers. It was enormous, bigger than anything humans had ever built before. The hull was made from compressed neutronium alloys. According to normal physics, this material should not exist. But humanity had learned to bend the rules of science when they were desperate enough. The hull was so dense that Council sensors could not see through it. Their weapons would not be able to scratch it. Alex had tested small pieces with every weapon Earth owned. Nothing damaged the material. On the 3rd day after President Bennett gave the order, Captain Nick Foster arrived at Triton. He was 42 years old and had been commanding ships for 15 years. He was Earth's best naval officer. He had fought pirates near the asteroid belt and protected mining colonies from raiders. But he had never seen anything like Judgment. When Captain Foster first entered the construction bay, he stopped moving. He just floated there, staring at the ship for 10 full minutes. Alex Murphy watched him and said nothing. Everyone reacted the same way the first time they saw what humanity had built. The ship was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It looked like something from a nightmare, all sharp angles and weapon systems that did not belong on any normal vessel. The ship's main power came from a contained singularity at its core, a black hole held in place by technology that barely worked. The power from that tiny piece of destroyed space was enough to run everything on Earth, with energy left over, and Judgment needed all that power for its weapons. Alex had run the calculations 1,000 times. The ship could destroy planets, not just make them lifeless, but actually break them apart into pieces. The crew selection happened fast. 2,000 volunteers came from every country on Earth. The best pilots, the smartest engineers, the bravest soldiers. All of them knew they might not survive. All of them came anyway. Among the crew was Lieutenant Kate Stevens. She was 28 years old and had perfect scores in every weapons simulation. She had never actually fired a shot in combat, but her instructors said she was the best they had ever seen. She would control Judgment's main weapon. Commander Dan Price joined as the navigation specialist. He was 35. and had mapped more of the solar system than anyone else alive. He knew every asteroid, every moon, every hidden pocket of space where ships could hide. If anyone could fly a ship as massive as Judgment, it was him. Dr. Emma Walsh became the chief medical officer. She was 41 and had pioneered new treatments for radiation sickness. The ship's power core gave off radiation that would kill normal humans in minutes. Emma had developed drugs that would let the crew survive even if the shielding failed. She had tested the drugs on herself first, spending 3 days in a radiation chamber to prove they worked. While the crew assembled, the Council's armada waited patiently at the edge of the solar system. Ambassador Vector sent messages to Earth every day. He reminded humans that the deadline was approaching. He offered help with the evacuation. He even promised that some humans could stay as workers in the mining operations. He sounded so reasonable, so kind. He did not seem to understand that he was threatening to destroy an entire civilization's home. Earth stayed silent. No messages went back to the Council. This made them suspicious at first, but then they saw activity all over the solar system. Energy signatures spiked near Mars. Ships moved between Earth and the Moon constantly. Material transports flew to the outer colonies. The Council's sensors detected all of this, and they assumed humans were preparing to leave. They had seen other species evacuate before. It always looked like chaos. What the Council did not see was the work at Triton. Every day, the engineers installed new systems on Judgment. The weapon arrays came online one at a time. Each one drew power from the Singularity Core. Each one could bend space-time in ways that made normal physics break down. Alex Murphy supervised every installation personally. There was no room for mistakes. If the weapons failed, Earth would fall. On day 25, they brought the Singularity Core to full power for the first time. The entire moon of Triton glowed with pale blue light for 3 hours. Space itself warped around the ship. Sensors across the solar system detected the energy spike, but it faded before anyone could identify the source. When the core stabilized, it was producing more power than all of Earth's reactors combined, and that was at minimum capacity. Captain Foster spent those days learning every system on his ship. He walked through every corridor, talked to every crew member, studied every weapon. He knew that once they left Triton, there would be no time for learning. They would face 300 enemy warships with a vessel that had never been tested in real combat. Everything had to work perfectly the first time. On day 28, Captain Foster called his entire crew together in the assembly bay. 2,000 people floated in zero gravity looking at their captain. Some of them were scared, some were excited. All of them were ready. Foster did not give them an inspiring speech. He did not tell them they were heroes. He simply told them the truth. They were about to take a weapon that could destroy civilizations and aim it at the most powerful military force in the galaxy. If they won, the Council would never threaten Earth again. Humanity would be safe. But if they lost, Earth would still fall. Their sacrifice would buy their families no extra time. The only difference would be that they would die fighting instead of running away. Captain Foster asked if anyone wanted to leave. He said there was no shame in being afraid. This was not a normal battle. This was a fight against impossible odds with an untested weapon. He would understand if people chose to go home to their families. Not a single person moved. Not one crew member asked to leave. They all stayed floating silently in the bay, ready to follow their captain into battle. Foster looked at them and felt something like pride. These were the people who would save Earth or die trying. These were the best humanity had to offer. Alex Murphy made the final checks on day 29. Every system was green. Every weapon was ready. The ship was as complete as they could make it. He found Captain Foster on the bridge, staring at the empty captain's chair. Alex told him the ship was ready. Foster nodded and asked if Alex thought they would win. Alex was quiet for a moment, then he said something honest. He did not know if they would win. The ship was powerful beyond anything he had imagined when they started building it 30 years ago. But it had never been tested. They were betting everything on technology that might fail. They were trusting calculations and simulations instead of real experience. But he also knew one thing for certain. If they did not try, Earth was finished. This was humanity's only chance. Captain Foster sat down in the captain's chair for the first time. It felt comfortable, like it was made for him. He looked around the bridge at his crew. Kate Stevens at weapons. Dan Price at navigation. Emma Walsh monitoring the medical systems. 2,000 souls ready to fight for their home. On day 30, the deadline expired. The Council's fleet began moving into the solar system. Earth's time had run out, but humanity was not running. Humanity was waiting in the darkness near Neptune, and they had brought something terrible with them. The Council's armada moved into Earth's solar system like a slow wave of metal and power. 300 warships spread out in perfect formation. They had done this before on other worlds. The procedure was always the same. Secure orbit around the planet, establish control, begin evacuation. The Council's admiral was a veteran named Corvus. He had been fighting for 40 years and had never lost a battle. He expected this day to be simple and routine. The fleet split into 3 groups as they passed Jupiter's orbit. One group would take position around Earth. Another would secure Mars and the Moon. The third would round up human ships and disable them. It was all very organized and efficient. The Council prided itself on being civilized even when destroying someone's home. Ambassador Vector sat in his command ship, the Sovereign Authority. He felt satisfied. Humanity had been silent for 30 days, which meant they accepted their fate. Some species fought at the end, but most recognized the futility of resistance. The Council always won. The Council had always won for 12,000 years. Today would be no different. The Council sensors were focused on Earth and the inner planets. They watched human ships moving frantically, monitored communication traffic, tracked energy signatures. Everything looked like a species preparing for evacuation. No one was watching Neptune. No one was looking at the outer darkness where judgment waited. Captain Nick Foster stood on his bridge, watching the Council fleet approach on his displays. His hands were steady. His breathing was calm. He had been preparing for this moment his entire career without knowing it. Every battle, every simulation, every hour of training had led him here. He looked at his weapons officer. Kate Stevens sat at her console with her fingers resting on the controls. She was nervous but excited. The weapon she controlled was the most powerful thing humans had ever built. She had practiced with simulations for months, but this would be the first real firing. She did not know if she was ready. Captain Foster seemed to believe in her, so she would trust his judgment. Commander Dan Price checked the navigation systems one more time. The course was programmed and ready. When they moved, they would need to be fast and precise. The ship was enormous, but the singularity drive let it move in ways that seemed impossible. Space would bend around them. Normal physics would stop applying. They would appear where they needed to be before the enemy could react. Captain Foster gave the order. Decloak. Show them what we brought. The ship's active camouflage shut down. Every sensor in the solar system suddenly detected judgment. On 300 Council warships, alarms started screaming. Computer systems registered an energy signature so powerful, they initially identified it as a star. Officers shouted reports. Admirals demanded explanations. Ambassador Vector's 4 eyes went wide with confusion and the first touch of fear. Judgment emerged from Neptune's shadow like something from a nightmare. 5 kilometers long, bristling with weapons powered by a contained singularity. The ship was massive and beautiful and terrifying. Its hull absorbed light strangely, making it look like a piece of space had been cut out and shaped into a vessel. The Council fleet changed formation immediately, but there was chaos in their ranks. Nothing in their databases matched this ship. Nothing they knew about human technology could explain what they were seeing. Admiral Corvus recovered first. He had spent 40 years fighting, and he had learned to think clearly even when surprised. He gave orders quickly. Formation Delta. Maximum shields. Charge all weapons. Whatever this human ship was, they would destroy it. 300 ships against 1. The math was simple. Ambassador Vector sent a transmission to Judgment. His voice sounded confused and angry. He demanded to know what this ship was. He said humans had violated their treaties by building such a vessel. He threatened severe consequences for this provocation. His words came fast, almost panicked. Captain Foster opened a channel that reached every ship in the Council fleet. His voice was calm and level when he spoke. He identified himself as the captain of Earth's warship Judgment. He said that Earth rejected the Council's ultimatum. Humanity would not surrender their planet. They would not evacuate. They would not watch their home be destroyed without fighting back. Foster gave the Council one chance. Withdraw beyond the heliopause, the outer boundary of the solar system. Leave and never return. If they refused, Judgment would demonstrate exactly why humans had chosen that name for their ship. He gave them 60 seconds to decide. The silence that followed was heavy. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Admiral Corvus laughed. The sound came across the communication channel, harsh and mocking. One ship threatening 300. It was absurd. It was insulting. The Admiral had fought entire planetary rebellions. He had crushed pirate armadas. He had maintained the Council's power for 40 years. He would not be frightened by human arrogance. Admiral Corvus gave Captain Foster 60 seconds to surrender. After that, the Council fleet would destroy the presumptuous human vessel and continue with Earth's occupation. Foster had 1 minute to save his crew's lives. The Admiral sounded certain of victory. On Judgment's bridge, Kate Stevens watched her countdown timer. Captain Foster had given her clear instructions. Wait until they fire first. Let the historical record show that humanity did not start this fight. Let everyone know the Council attacked first. 58 seconds remaining. 50. 45. The Council fleet opened fire at 58 seconds. 300 ships unleashed everything they had. Plasma beams hot enough to vaporize steel. Kinetic accelerators firing projectiles at a fraction of light speed. Quantum torpedoes that phased through normal shields. The combined firepower could have destroyed a moon. The space between the fleets lit up like a new sun. Every weapon struck Judgment's shields and simply stopped. The exotic barrier absorbed energy that should have been impossible to contain. The ship did not even shudder from the impact. The shields glowed bright blue for a moment, then faded back to normal. Captain Foster's expression did not change. He nodded to Kate. She pressed the firing control. The main weapon was called the Ragnarok Array. It ran the entire length of Judgment's spine. It channeled power directly from the Singularity Core and focused it through dimensional compressors. When Kate activated it, the weapon did not fire a beam or launch a projectile. It created a rift in spacetime itself, a wound in reality. The rift appeared in the center of the Council's formation. It lasted for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, 70 ships simply stopped existing. Their matter broke down into component atoms. The laws of physics temporarily stopped working in that small piece of space, and everything caught in it came apart. Another 40 ships at the rift's edges were torn to pieces by gravitational forces. Metal hulls crumpled like paper. Crews died instantly. When the rift closed, 110 Council ships were gone. The remaining 190 vessels hung in space, their commanders unable to process what they had just witnessed. In 3 seconds, more than 1/3 of their fleet had been destroyed. The Council's weapons could not scratch the human ship, but the human weapon had carved through their formation like it was nothing. The silence that followed was absolute. No one spoke. No one moved. The balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted. The rules of warfare had just been rewritten. The Council, which had ruled for 12,000 years, had just discovered they were not invincible. Captain Foster opened the communication channel again. His voice was still calm, but now there was steel beneath it. He repeated his offer. Withdraw beyond the heliopause or face complete destruction. He would give them 5 minutes to decide this time. 5 minutes to choose between retreat and death. Admiral Corvus stared at his displays. Half his forward group was gone. Just gone, his hands were shaking. He had never felt fear like this before. He gave the order to retreat. The fleet would withdraw. They would return to Council space and request reinforcements. They needed time to understand what had happened here. But Ambassador Vector overrode the Admiral's command. The Zentari's voice came across the fleet channel, sharp and angry. The Council did not retreat. The Council did not surrender to inferior species. They would press the attack. They would swarm the human ship with numbers. If necessary, they would die with honor. But they would not run away like cowards. 80 ships followed Vector's order. 80 captains chose pride over survival. They accelerated toward Judgment, weapons charging, shields at maximum. They thought that maybe if they all fired at once, they could overwhelm the human defenses. They thought that maybe courage and numbers could defeat this impossible weapon. Captain Foster watched them come. His expression did not change. He did not look angry or triumphant. He just looked sad. He gave Kate Stevens the order to fire again. This time she could use full power. The second rift lasted 5 seconds instead of 3. It was larger, hungrier. Kate directed it through the attacking formation like a scythe cutting wheat. When it closed, 73 more ships were gone. The remaining 7 vessels had their hulls scarred and their systems failing. They turned and fled, joining the rest of the Council fleet in retreat. Judgment had fired twice. 183 Council warships were destroyed. Earth had not lost a single ship. The battle was over before. The remaining Council ships fled at maximum speed. 117 vessels that had entered Earth's system with confidence now ran for their lives. Their shields were damaged. Their weapons were drained. Their crews were in shock. They had never seen power like this. They had never imagined that such a weapon could exist. Captain Nick Foster watched them go on his displays. He could have destroyed them all. Judgment still had plenty of power. The Singularity Core was barely being used, but he let most of them run. They would carry the message back to the Council. They would tell everyone what happened here. Fear was sometimes more useful than death, but one ship was not allowed to escape so easily. Ambassador Vectar's vessel, the Sovereign Authority, was running with the others. Foster gave Commander Dan Price new orders. Pursue that ship. Catch it before it reaches the edge of the system. They needed to have a conversation with the ambassador. Judgment moved with impossible grace for something so large. The singularity drive warped space around the ship. Distance became meaningless. The normal laws of acceleration did not apply. Within minutes, they caught up to the Sovereign Authority at the system's edge. The Zentari ship tried to accelerate faster, but it was useless. Judgment could move anywhere it wanted. Captain Foster opened a private channel to Ambassador Vectar. The Zentari appeared on screen and he looked different now. His 4 eyes darted around frantically. His skin had gone pale. His hands trembled. All his confidence and pride were gone. He was just a scared person who realized he had made a terrible mistake. Foster spoke quietly, but his words were recorded. He wanted everyone to hear this eventually. He told Vectar that humanity had tried to be peaceful. For 40 years, humans had followed every council rule. They had accepted every restriction. They had been patient and respectful and obedient. And the council had responded by trying to take their home. By threatening to destroy the only planet humans had ever lived. Foster explained that the council had made a choice when they sent their fleet to Earth. They had chosen to treat humanity like resources instead of people. They had chosen to ignore diplomacy and use force. So humanity had been forced to show them what happened when you pushed a peaceful species too far. Earth had built a weapon that could end civilizations because the council had left them no other choice. Now Vectar would return to the council's capital world. He would tell them what happened. He would show them the sensor data. He would make them understand that Earth had weapons they could not defend against. And he would deliver a message. Humanity would never be threatened again. If the Council valued the thousands of worlds under their protection, they would leave Earth alone forever. Then Captain Foster closed the channel. He ordered the weapons powered down. Judgment turned away from the fleeing ambassador and began a slow patrol of Earth's orbital space. The ship would remain visible to every telescope on the planet and in the system, a silent guardian that would protect humanity's home. News of the battle spread through the galaxy faster than light. The Council's fastest courier ships carried the story to every corner of known space. Within a week, every civilized world knew what happened. The invincible Council fleet had been shattered by a single human warship. 183 ships destroyed in minutes. The humans had a weapon that could tear holes in reality itself. The reaction was immediate and widespread. Species that had served the Council for thousands of years started asking dangerous questions. If humanity could build such a weapon in secret, what else were they capable of? If the Council could be defeated so easily, were they really worthy of obedience? Small rebellions started on distant worlds. Pirates became bolder. The careful order the Council had maintained began to crack. On Earth, people filled the streets in celebration. They danced and cried and hugged strangers. The threat was over. Their planet was safe. The Council had been defeated. But not everyone was celebrating. Many people felt afraid of what humanity had become. They had built a weapon that could destroy civilizations. What did that say about who humans were? President Claire Bennett addressed the entire planet in a broadcast. She looked tired but relieved. She explained that judgment had been built because the Council forced humanity to build it. The weapon existed to protect Earth, nothing more. But she also said something important. Humanity now possessed terrible power, power to destroy worlds, power to kill billions, And with that power came enormous responsibility. The debate raged across every nation. Some people wanted to build more ships like Judgment. They said humanity should become the dominant military power in the galaxy. Others demanded the ship be destroyed. They argued that possessing such weapons would corrupt human values. Town halls and parliaments and Congress chambers echoed with passionate arguments about what Earth should do next. Dr. Ben Carter spoke to the United Nations 3 weeks after the battle. He was the one who had revealed Project Warhammer's existence. Now he had to explain why it was built. He told the representatives that the Council had given humanity a simple choice: build weapons or lose everything. Humans chose to survive. If the galaxy's powerful civilizations could learn to respect peaceful species, then weapons like Judgment would never be necessary again. But until that day came, Earth would remain armed and ready. Ambassador Vector arrived at the Council's capital world of Zentral Prime 1 month after the battle. His testimony before the full council lasted 6 hours. He described everything in detail: the appearance of Judgment, the failed attack by 300 ships, the rifts in space-time that made ships simply stop existing. He shared the sensor data that proved everything he said. The council chamber fell silent. 5,000 representatives from 1,000 worlds sat without speaking. For 12,000 years, the council had been the supreme power. They had believed themselves invincible. Now they had discovered that a species barely 40 years into space travel had built weapons they could not defend against. The debate that followed was intense and angry. Some council members called for immediate war, gather every ship in the galaxy and crush Earth before humans could build more weapons. Others argued for diplomacy. Starting a war they might not win could destroy everything the council had built. A smaller group said something more uncomfortable. Maybe the council had brought this on themselves. Maybe treating other species as resources instead of equals had finally caught up with them. The arguments continued for days. Military leaders presented attack plans. Diplomats suggested negotiations. Scientists tried to explain how the human weapon worked and failed, because the physics made no sense. The council had always made decisions slowly and carefully. This time they had to decide fast. Other species were watching. If the council showed weakness, their entire empire might collapse. On the 42nd day after the battle, the council voted. The chamber was packed with representatives. The tension was heavy enough to feel. When the final count came in, the decision was made by a narrow margin. The council chose negotiation over war. They would send a diplomatic mission to Earth. They would try to find a peaceful solution. They would not attack humanity unless absolutely necessary. But the vote also included a secret provision. If negotiations failed, if Earth became too dangerous, if the humans started building more planet-killer ships, then the council would have no choice. They would mobilize every vessel in the galaxy. They would fight to the end to remove the threat. Peace was the first choice, but survival was more important than peace. Ambassador Vector was relieved of his duties. He had started this crisis by demanding Earth's destruction. Now someone more diplomatic would handle the situation. The council chose Counselor Mara Venn, a Talarian known for fairness and wisdom. She had opposed the original decision to strip mine Earth. She had been one of the few voices arguing for treating humanity with respect. Now she would try to prevent a war that could destroy both sides. Mara Venn prepared for her mission to Earth. She studied everything about humans. Their history, their culture, their values. She watched recordings of Captain Foster's words during the battle. She read Dr. Carter's statement to the United Nations. She tried to understand what kind of species would build such a terrible weapon and then hesitate to use it again. What she found surprised her. Humans were not naturally violent. They did not want to conquer. They just wanted to survive and protect their home. They had built Judgment because the council had threatened them. If the council had approached Earth with respect instead of demands, none of this would have happened. Mara Venn realized something important. The council had created its own enemy. By treating humanity as inferior, by trying to take their planet, they had forced humans to become dangerous. Now she had to find a way to make peace with a species that had every reason to distrust the council. It would not be easy, but it was necessary. The alternative was a war that would tear the galaxy apart. 3 months after the battle, the council's diplomatic ship arrived at Earth's orbit. The vessel was small and completely unarmed. This was deliberate. Counselor Mara Venn wanted to show that she came in peace. She wanted humanity to see that not everyone in the council agreed with what had happened. Captain Nick Foster, now promoted to admiral, met with the council delegation aboard Judgment. The meeting room was in the ship's observation deck. Behind Admiral Foster, Earth was visible through the massive viewport. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in the atmosphere. Foster had chosen this location carefully. He wanted the council representatives to see what they had tried to take. He wanted them to understand what they had almost destroyed. Counselor Mara Venn entered the room with 3 assistants. She was a Talarian, tall and thin with gray skin and large eyes. She moved with grace and dignity. When she saw Earth through the viewport, she stopped and looked at it for a long moment. Then she turned to Admiral Foster and bowed slightly. It was a gesture of respect, something no council member had shown humanity before. Mara Venn spoke first. Her voice was calm and sincere. She acknowledged the council's mistake. She said the decision to strip mine Earth was wrong. The council had been arrogant and cruel. They had forgotten that every species deserved respect, regardless of their military power. She offered formal apologies on behalf of the Galactic Council for the threat against Earth. She explained that the battle had forced the council to examine itself. For 12,000 years they had ruled through strength. They had grown comfortable with power. They had stopped seeing other species as equals and started seeing them as resources or obstacles. The attack on Earth had been a catalyst. It made the council realize they had become the very thing they were supposed to prevent: bullies, tyrants. Admiral Foster listened without interrupting. President Claire Bennett joined the meeting through a secure holographic link. She appeared sitting at the table, looking tired but attentive. When Mara Venn finished speaking, the president asked the most important question. What guarantee did humanity have that the council would honor any agreement? What would prevent them from gathering strength and returning in 10 years or 100 years with overwhelming force? Mara Venn's response was honest and practical. The galaxy had changed. Since the battle, 57 civilizations had sent delegations to Earth. They wanted trade agreements. They wanted defensive pacts. They wanted to be humanity's allies. The Council's authority had been built on fear and the belief that resistance was impossible. Humanity had shattered that belief. If the Council attacked Earth now, dozens of other species would see it as an opportunity to break free. The galactic order would collapse into chaos and war. The Council could not afford that. They needed stability more than they needed revenge. And there was another reason. Mara Venn's scientists had analyzed the sensor data from Judgment's weapons. They had concluded that human understanding of dimensional physics was at least a century ahead of the Council's best research. If Earth could build one ship like Judgment, they could build more. The Council could not win a direct war against humanity, not without casualties and destruction that would leave them vulnerable to every other threat in the galaxy. Pirates, rogue colonies, rival powers. The Council needed to make peace because war would destroy them. The negotiations lasted 2 weeks. Admiral Foster and President Bennett drove hard bargains. They knew this might be their only chance to secure humanity's future. They demanded and received complete sovereignty over Earth's star system and 3 neighboring systems for expansion. Humanity gained full membership in the Council with voting rights equal to any other species. Most importantly, the agreement acknowledged humanity's right to maintain defensive forces of any size and capability. This last point was crucial. It effectively legitimized Judgment and any future vessels like it. The Council was admitting that they could not and would not try to disarm humanity. Earth would remain a military power and the galaxy would have to accept it. But humanity also made concessions. Earth agreed to share some of its advanced technology with the Council for defensive purposes only. This would help strengthen the galactic community against external threats. Admiral Foster personally pledged that Judgment would only be used in defense of Earth or Council member worlds facing existential threats. The weapon would not be used for conquest or aggression. President Bennett announced that Earth would open diplomatic academies. Young humans would be trained in galactic politics, alien cultures, and peaceful conflict resolution. Humanity's new power would be wielded with wisdom and restraint. They would not become the bullies they had defeated. When the agreement was signed, Mara Venn looked relieved. She had prevented a war that would have torn the galaxy apart. She had also learned something about humanity. They were dangerous when threatened, but they preferred peace. They had built a weapon that could destroy civilizations, but they chose not to use it unless absolutely necessary. This made them different from many species the Council had dealt with. 6 months after the battle, Lieutenant Kate Stevens stood on Judgment's Bridge during a routine patrol. She had been promoted to commander and served as the ship's executive officer. Through the viewport, she could see Earth in the distance. Her home. Safe because humans had refused to accept the unacceptable. Safe because they had built something terrible to protect something precious. Kate thought about the day she fired the Ragnarok array. She remembered the countdown timer. The moment of firing, the way 110 ships had simply stopped existing. She had killed thousands of beings in seconds. The memory would stay with her forever. But she also knew she would do it again if Earth was threatened. Some prices were worth paying. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. People went to work. Children went to school. The panic and fear of the ultimatum faded into memory. But things had changed in subtle ways. Humans looked at the stars differently now. They knew there were threats out there. They knew the galaxy was not always friendly. But they also knew they could defend themselves. Dr. Ben Carter testified before international hearings about Project Warhammer. People wanted to know why the weapon was built in secret. Why were resources diverted for 30 years without public knowledge? Carter's response was simple and direct. The weapon existed because the threat existed. If the galaxy learned to respect peaceful civilizations, such weapons would never be needed. But until that day came, humanity would remain vigilant. Admiral Foster received delegations from dozens of species. Some were potential allies genuinely interested in friendship. Others were potential threats trying to gather intelligence. Foster treated them all with careful courtesy. He was neither secretive nor boastful. The message was clear. Humanity was strong enough to defend itself, confident enough to be peaceful, but would never again be vulnerable to exploitation. The Galactic Council's power had been permanently diminished, but the galaxy became more stable. Species that had lived under Council rule now had an example of successful resistance. But they also saw that humanity sought cooperation rather than domination. New alliances formed. Old grievances were resolved through negotiation. Slowly, a new order emerged based on mutual respect rather than fear. In the construction yards around Triton, work quietly began on a second vessel. Not because humanity wanted war, but because the universe had taught them a hard lesson. Strength brought peace, but only if potential enemies knew that strength existed and would be used if necessary. The new ship would be faster and more powerful than Judgment. Its weapons would be even more advanced. But everyone hoped it would never need to fire a shot. Admiral Foster visited the construction site once a month. He watched the new ship take shape in the darkness beyond Neptune. Dr. Lisa Chen, now 80 years old, walked beside him during one inspection. She asked if he thought they had done the right thing. Building weapons capable of destroying civilizations? Was humanity still good if they possessed such terrible power? Foster was quiet for a long moment. Then he gestured toward Earth, visible as a bright star in the distance. He told her that the right thing was making sure that light kept shining, that humanity survived, that children grew up on the world their ancestors had called home, that Earth remained free. The Council had forced them to build Judgment by threatening Earth's existence. In doing so, they had proven that even the youngest species in the galaxy deserved respect, deserved sovereignty, deserved the chance to determine their own future. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. She understood. Sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be capable of war. Sometimes the only way to protect the innocent was to become dangerous. It was not a comfortable truth, but it was truth nonetheless. The galaxy had learned that day when Earth raised its planet-killer warship. It learned that humanity, when pushed to the edge, would not bow. It learned that compassion should never be mistaken for weakness, that patience should never be confused with helplessness. Most importantly, it learned that some civilizations, when faced with annihilation, would build something so terrible that their enemies would have no choice but to seek peace. Judgment remained on patrol, a silent guardian watching over humanity's home. Its weapons had fired twice in